Okay, everybody, welcome back to our seminar. We're going to start as usual with our short video, this time about um, backtesting. Is it the first we're going to have about backtesting? And we're going to watch our short video. Okay. Okay.
All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about one of the most powerful and honestly, one of the most misused tools an investor has backtesting. You see, when you do it right, it's a total game changer for your strategy. But if you do it wrong, well, it's basically just a really effective way to lie to yourself. And, that really is the perfect way to look at it. Just imagine for a second, what if you could hop in a time machine, go back 10 or 20 years, and see if that brilliant investment idea you have today would have actually made you money, all without risking a single penny? That's the incredible promise of backtesting. So, at its core, it's a simulation. That's the key. We're using the past as our own personal laboratory to stress test our ideas for the future. It's a super powerful concept, but as you're about to find out, the devil is absolutely in the details. So, let's start with the good stuff. Let's talk about why this time machine is so incredibly valuable in the first place. The real point of a backtest isn't just to get one big flashy return number. Nope. It's about asking the much tougher questions. Like, is my strategy consistent? Does it completely fall apart during a market crash, or does it hold up? It's all about figuring out if your idea has legs before you bet your hard-earned money on it. Okay, so we've seen the dream, right? But now we have to talk about the peril. This is the big trap. This is where so many investors go wrong, and where that perfect, beautiful backtest can turn out to be nothing more than a fantasy. And here's that trap. With the 2020 vision of hindsight, it is just so easy to tweak your rules, to cherry pick your data, and to build a strategy that would have worked perfectly in the past. The only problem? It's completely useless for the future because it was built on a foundation of wishful thinking. This chart breaks the problem down perfectly. Think about it. Back in, say, 2010, you were operating with limited data and a whole lot of uncertainty. But today? Today, you know exactly which companies went belly up and which ones became giants. That difference between what was knowable then and what's obvious now, that's the hindsight gap. And a bad backtest lives entirely on the what you know now side of this chart. And this critical error has a name. It's called lookahead bias. And let me be clear, this is the cardinal sin of backtesting. It's like looking at the answer key before you take the test. The second you use information in your simulation that you couldn't have possibly known at the time, your entire test is contaminated. The results aren't just a little bit off, they're completely and utterly worthless. So how do we avoid this disaster? Well, we have to follow the golden rule. We have to force ourselves, kicking and screaming if we have to operate inside what's called the anti-monde. That just means the world as it actually existed at each point in the past, with all its messiness, its uncertainty, and its limited information. Okay, so we know the dangers. We get it. Hindsight is a trap. So now let's talk about solutions. Let's build a practical, disciplined process that keeps us honest and actually produces meaningful results. A really solid, robust backtest boils down to these 3 steps. That's it. It's not about finding some secret magic formula. It's about creating a rigorous framework and sticking to it. Let's break them down. First things first, you have to be honest about how you actually invest. Are you adding money every month from your paycheck, or are you maybe retired and taking money out? A simple buy and hold test is totally useless if that's not what you do in real life. Your test has to mirror your reality. All right, step 2 is about filtering your universe of potential stocks. And this is such a cool idea. You're being intentionally biased, and that bias isn't a flaw, it's a feature. Think about it. You're not trying to find that one needle in a giant haystack. You're trying to get rid of most of the hay first. It's not about finding the next Tesla. It's about making sure you avoid the next Enron. And by doing this, by screening out the junk stocks right from the start, you fundamentally increase your odds of finding a winner before your real strategy even kicks in. It's like you're choosing to fish in a much, much better stocked pond. So this is the big one. How do we actually stay in that anti-monde, that world as it truly was? This is how. It's a technique called rolling calibration. All it means is that as your simulation moves forward through time, you're only allowed to update your strategy using the information that would have been available up to that point. No peeking into the future, ever. And here's what that discipline looks like in the real world. As you add new money over time, each of those blue blocks represents a new decision. The key is that the process has to be recalibrated using only the data that was available before that specific date. It's a constant process of relearning using only what you knew at the time. And all of this brings us to what is, without a doubt, the most important takeaway from this entire explainer. This is a complete shift in how you should think about testing a strategy. You see, a good backtest isn't about the final performance number. It's about whether your process can answer these questions. Did I stay honest and avoid hindsight? Is my strategy robust, or does it completely shatter if I change one little thing? And maybe most importantly, is this something I can actually do in the real world? This is the mantra. You should write this down. Process beats performance. A spectacular historical chart that you got by cheating is worthless. A pretty good chart that you got through a tough, repeatable process, that is absolutely priceless. Because at the end of the day, the only performance that matters is the performance you can repeat. The backtest isn't the final product. The final product is a strategy you can trust, one that's built on a solid foundation, ready to face the future, which, as we all know, is always uncertain. So I'll leave you with this final thought. The next time you see some amazing backtest with incredible returns, don't just ask what the numbers were. Ask how it was built. Because the real question isn't what would have worked in the past. The real question is my process solid enough to handle the future?
Okay, we are done with our short video. Let's go back to a few recommendations about backtesting. First of all, it's important to remember that backtesting indeed is a little bit like the old say. There is, I think, a very ancient say that tells us that the river never crosses the same bridge twice, which means that the water that pass the bridge are past waters, and of course we cannot rely on past waters always to know what's going to happen in the future. So we have to be aware of that, and while doing some back testing, we have to take that into account. And one of the things that we have to take into account is that whether you want to test in the past is the same process that we're going to use in the future. And this planning table that we have in our platform draws our attention to that. Let's imagine, for instance, that we have decided to invest in 39 stocks, and 20 of them to be invested on a buy and hold strategy. So basically, we start with 20 stocks. We will go on until the end. We will keep them until the end of our horizon. And here we have chosen a given horizon for that, which should be 2028. Or if we, on the contrary, we have decided to invest the other 19 stocks in periodical drawdown process, where we basically keep the stocks also until the end, but we are prepared to keep withdrawing some money from our portfolio. So if that's our strategy, so you see that when you're going to plan to do some back testing, it's important that you also backtest for the kind of strategy that you are looking for. So although the past doesn't guarantee the future, it's important that when you assess the future, you are aware of your strategy and use that awareness to develop a backtesting program to test your thesis or your strategy or your model. And so that's one of the things that you have to take into account. The other thing to take into account, which is very important, is to be to make mistakes, and especially to fall into well-known traps. The first well-known trap is to use in the past information that could be only available in the future. So you cannot use information in the past that wasn't yet available at the time. So that's an important thing to bear in mind, and which we can look in our oops. Okay, if you look at our slides, for instance, we have this interesting slide that allows us to look to see how we should look at backtesting. First, of course, you have to have this clear distinction between past and future, and you have to make sure that you have a barrier between the past and the future, because we really cannot, when assessing the past, we cannot look at the future. That's the fundamental. So when we look at historical context, data available, previous events and so on, it doesn't mean that it will happen in the future. So that's an important thing to take into account. And this it's quite easy actually to when doing backtesting. It's quite easy to fall into this trap of using future information to study the past. And that even if you are not interested in cheating people, or if you are really trying your best to be honest with the kind of tests that you are conducting, very frequently, without realizing that, you are falling into that trap. That's the thing I would like to draw your attention to you. And we now going to show you how we can easily backtest in our platform, and at the same time draw your attention to some of the pitfalls that we may face while doing some backtesting. Okay, let's imagine, for instance, that we want to test one of our strategies that we have here. Let's choose, for instance, the Lynch strategy, for example. If you're going to backtest the Lynch strategy, and well, it's here for France, so let's use France. The first thing we need to understand is that, of course, that strategy is based on a certain number of filters. So, of course, here you have filters that are traditionally associated with this strategy. And we have already discussed that we have to select the range of that we should adjust those filters for each one of the criteria that we use to assess the company. Here we have SMV, we have company market, the total revenue, institution ownership, and SMK. So, for instance, if you look, we have some of these filters that are really general filters, like market size, cap size. But what is unique about this strategy is that this investor has as a point that you like companies that are still small, but the institutional ownership is not yet very high. But it has already attracted the attention of some institutional investors, and at the same time, a company that is growing in terms of sales. So that's we have these two features here: total revenue average over the last 3 years, and the institutional ownership. So this is the the kind of criteria that is used for by this investor. Okay, now how did you get to this? For instance, like total revenue. Why companies within the 40 with the total revenue on the top 60% is enough, or should it be just the top 90%? Or the top 80%, and the same likewise with institutional ownership. How we come to this idea that it's between 50 and 9% of the companies in terms of ownership will meet the successful criteria. Okay, so this we have some data here on this section called strategy analysis, but also we have a program that we use to identify which are the best interval for to get the highest likelihood of finding stocks with that beat the market. Let me exemplify with a simple drawing here. Imagine that you have this circle and you have in here all the stocks, and the stocks will be distributed randomly in terms of rate of return. But if you actually rearrange the stocks in based on the sales growth of those companies, then of course you get a different distribution. And then if say as a whole you say that, for instance, 20% of the there's a 20% chance that if you choose the stocks randomly, you might select a stock that is greater than the market average. Okay, so if you select that, then you have to find those deciles. You know, you have to have the various deciles here. You have to find those deciles that eventually have a higher percentage than the 20%. So if you choose randomly in the entire market and you have a chance of 20%, if, for instance, you choose on this segment here of the market, you may eventually have your chance of beating the market is probably 40%. So when you do use a filter, and if you then starting using different filters, you have to make sure that when you combine one filter with the other, you get, you know, the number of stocks that meet, but filters will be reduce the number of stocks, and that's what happens here. So how we choose this? Using a simulation. So we have use different simulation methods that allow us to choose these criteria. So it's not just listening to what people say. Okay, let's say that the company must be in the top 10% or the top 25 or whatever. It doesn't matter really, because we need to use some statistical method of trying to get a biased sample, because you see here we are not trying to find a sample that replicates the market as we were doing last time. We were talking about the ETFs that replicate the market. Here we are using trying to find a biased sample that is stable, and it is relevant for various filters. That allows us to find then a subsample of the market where the likelihood of finding top performing company is very high. So that's the principle here. Okay, but let's imagine that this was the perfect filter. So we have the perfect filters here. Now we have to decide how we are going to test it. Okay, and that's where what we need to consider. First, of course, we want to consider if you want to use the entire market, or just, as we usually often, just the top 13 segments of the market. If you recall, I said that we split the market in 25 segments. And if you want just to use the top a buy recommendation with a good rating, or a buy recommendation with above average, and so on. So if you use just the top 14, which we usually use based on our empirical experience, but it could be more or less. So let's say, so I'm just selecting, dropping the other 11 segments of the market, which basically I keep 60% of them. The same in the industries. If I want to select all of them, so every industry will be selected, or if I want just to have say the top 10 or the top 5 industries, and that's what we do. And then finally, which is the period that I should want to use? Is it 1 year? Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? What is the back period that I'm going to use? Shall I use use for testing a back period plus an out-of-bound period. Let's imagine that I want to go to March. I want to start in last year. Where is now? Okay. For instance, I want to start in let's say October, 20th of October. And shall I test it to until the end of the year? And for instance, shall I test it until December, which should be, grossly speaking, 90 days, and then I have another 90 days to see if my strategy worked fine in the past, but it also worked fine in the out-of-bound period. So if I do that, then I test it both in the past and in an out-of-bound period after this first test. Okay, let's see that. Let's do it like this, for instance. Well, actually, let's make it exactly 3 months. So, which would be September, I think, September 29. Get then October, November, and December. Okay, if I do a test for this period, let's see how this screen performed. I select just 10 stocks, but I can, of course, select much more. I can select 50, 20, and so on. So it depends on the number, the type of sample that I want to extract. Okay, so we have here found the results. The results were quite good for this strategy. You see 10% return for this very short period, while the ETF, the CAC, we are using the France here, the CAC only returned 0.2. So this was quite good. But the fact that this was good at the end of last year, was it still good in the start of this year? So okay, I'm going now to change it, the dates here, and I'm going to start on the last day here, and going back to our date today, and we should be here. Oops. Okay. So let's how it worked on this period. Let's imagine. Okay, fine, it worked very well that period. Let's say if it also worked very well on this period here, and okay, let's see what it tells us. Okay, we see that here the strategy, although the market has worsened, so actually the CAC has declined in these early days of 2026. The portfolio still beat the market. So in that account, I would say that the strategy worked fine. Okay, so it did work fine. But let's think that this is not all. I mean, there is a few things that we should also consider. Let's look at something else. Let's use our backtest here. You see, I did manually, and everyone can do it manually as I did here. But we have here a backtest button, which allows me to decide to use, for instance, a longer horizon. But I'm just keeping 1 year. And I want to say which kind of frequency I wanted. Okay, I did quarterly. I can use it quarterly as well, half year, and so on. Okay, I'm choosing quarterly, and now I'm selecting the best. How many days I want to select before the date where we are today, before 19. I can put 10, 20, 15, whatever. Right now, I'll just put 5 days because I don't want it to take too long, because this takes a bit of time. I'll just 5 days. Typically, we usually use 15 days, but just to be fast, let's do it in 5 days. That it will be running. It's running now, and it is we'll see the results as soon as it finishes. Meanwhile, we can mention some of the other things that we should consider. One of them is whether we can find historical patterns that we expect to be similar in the future. Let's say if we believe that we are, for instance, at the top of the market is overvalued, for instance, and so we expect some correction sooner or later. So we may decide to test this strategy for a past period, can be 2-3 years ago or even more, where the market was more or less in the similar situation. So this is testing, back testing for trying to find periods that have some similarity with what we expect that will occur in the foreseeable future. Again, let's say that some of the strategies are seasonal. Okay, they work very well because some of the stocks may have some seasonality, and so the strategy may work fine during a certain period. Let's see, we can also use seasons. So let's see if we can adjust for seasonality, and we can, of course, try to do that. We can do that, and we should also take that into account. Okay, it's take a bit to give us the results. Let me just remind some of the problems with the back testing. So we talked about there's some practical problems, of course, that one has to make sure that you solve them. One of them is that, as you know, a lot of stocks are subject to so-called corporate events. And among those corporate events, for instance, stock splits or reverse splits or stock dividends and so on may require the use of adjusted prices. So one of the things that we have to, especially when dealing with the past, one of the things that we have to make sure that we are adjusting for is that we are really using adjusted prices, so that any splits or stock splits that may occur will not affect our results. So it's, again, something that is very important to bear in mind. Of course, we also have to bear in mind that we are not mixing different strategies. Imagine, for instance, that if my strategy is to invest in a specific sector, it doesn't make sense to test the strategy for the whole market, because my strategy is to invest in a specific sector, so it doesn't make sense as well. So the back testing has to be always based on what we plan to do in the future, and we have to have a past that is clear of information from the future and clear of all these practical problems. Okay, so let's see the results of this back test. We can open this report here. And what we have here, for instance, is that we have this chart. The chart itself is not very interesting, but what we did here, we tested not just the strategy, but we tested also the weighting method to be used. So let's say we use the same Lynch strategy, but with different weighting methods. We have here the 5 weighting methods that we use: equal weighting, capitalization, area Markowitz, and Marquez-Mendes, and SMR. And what we measure here is the excess return in relation to the market. So the ETF return was, it's here, you see. There's a medium of, and what we did it, so we got, in fact, a very good result, extremely good result. It's not always that you get this result, so we get 100% overperformance in relation to the CAC 40. And in some cases, like in the case of the capitalization weighting, that excess return would be huge. 27.3% would be a huge excess return. So this is And what does this return correspond to? We can now open again. Sorry, you have to go back here, I think. Okay. We can have some detail here. If you open this Excel spreadsheet, you can see what we have done. So basically what we did, we looked into, because we had chosen quarterly analysis, okay? So we looked into a 3-month period, 6-month period, 9-month period, and 12-month period. And the same for, so all these periods, we started on December, finished in March. All of them use the same end date, which will be the last day that we had, but they have different pasts. So we have tested the 12-month past, the 9-month, 6-month, and 3-month past. So then we have here the aggregate result, and the same for the day before, today and the day before, and so on, the 13th and the 2nd. And if you have used more days, of course, this would go further down. So we can then check, of course, some of the numbers, see what it happened. So we can look at specific dates or periods and specific weighting methods, something that we can do easily with this feature in our platform. Okay, it's not this I wanted to show you. I want to go back to our... Where were we? Okay, we were here. Okay. So I think we are basically done now with this, but of course, what you can do, and it's important for you, imagine that you think that you want to be more strict with this, or you want to use this strategy just as a reference. In fact, you think you have some idea that tells you that if you use another variable, that would be better. So you can, because you can see that here you have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 109 or 110 different variables that you can use. And we have a system of testing all of them in one go and see which one produce better results. Okay, so you can test that. If you want to improve your strategy, you should do it through backtesting, not just thinking new ideas, bringing new ideas, but also, or more than that, by backtesting it for different periods.